Hello folks, happy to be back with our fourth video in this COVID series in as many months after starting off with the first one in April. Thank you for seeing these videos in our YouTube channel and sending us some awesome feedbacks and great questions. We'll try to address them in this video as well as bring in some wonderful data that we have seen in the last 1 month since our last video. Let's begin with the June jobs data that came out on July 2nd. If you recollect, prior to this we had taken you through in our last video on the May jobs data, which showed a 2.5 million jobs gain again up against a prediction of about 7.5 million jobs loss. So that was a reversal of almost 10 million. The June data continues to be optimistic and shows us 4.8 million jobs gain, which is almost double than that of May. In the May jobs data, we had predicted that the bottom formation in the Main Street has already taken place, and the June data further corroborates that fact. Now if we dive deep into the June data, we see that the main gain has come in manufacturing and in retail. That also further corroborates our prognosis that inventory overhang was very low as we entered into COVID. Therefore, as spending increased with the economy opening up, consumption increased, there has been a slowdown in the inventory resulting into a catch up that the manufacturing had to play. If you also recollect, we had pointed out at that point in time that because there is very little inventory overhang, the chances of we slipping into a recession or depression just yet is quite a far cry, and that's precisely what is happening as manufacturing is backing up and snapping back to catch up to play with the Main Street demand. Despite that, if we look at the savings rate, it is 20%. That's unbelievably high for American standards, and this makes us believe there is still a lot of pent up demand out there left in the table to be mopped up. So what can go wrong from here? Many of you has expressed your concern over the increase in the COVID cases reported as America is opening up. But if you really look at it, this was expected. Moreover, the testing rates across the board has gone up, and therefore more and more cases are being reported. Yet on another parameter, if you see, our governments are better, administration is better ready or better equipped to meet with the contingencies that may happen out of the resurgence. But more importantly, if you really look at it, the increase in the COVID cases reported are mostly in the sunny states around the Gulf of Mexico. On the other hand, the tri-states, which mostly took the first round of COVID on their chin, they are doing quite good and they are just fine. And if you really look at it, it is these tri-states that are the bulk of the American economy, both in terms of production and consumption, as compared to the sunny states along the Gulf Coast. So we feel in those parameters also it's just quite good, and we should sail through this unless the administration miscalculates its recalibration process of the opening up of the economy, and at places they are slack or slow in clamping down when things start to get out of control, if any. Hence, our prognosis on the V-shaped recovery is pretty much intact in our opinion. Now what can puncture this? If the lawmakers start squabbling for putting new relief measures in place as and when they are needed, or if the governments start imposing taxes in order to refill their national coffers and fail to pass on benefits such as low oil prices to the rest of the economy, yeah, then we definitely have the risk of the V shape getting into a W. Many of you has expressed serious concern about inflation, saying that there could be hyperinflation or inflation looming large. But we feel that the oil prices will remain in this $20 to $40 range in the near term, and over a longer period of time the oil prices are expected to further come down. And oil being a major input cost to our economy, we believe that this inflation is rather unfounded. For so long there is growth, there is manufacturing that is picking up, there is consumption, and the job losses can be restored or reversed. At the same time, the governments need to pass on these benefits to the rest of the economy. If they do not, the countries that will not pass on the benefit of low oil prices to the rest of the economy, they will rather suffer a permanent impairment. Then comes the obvious question as to why we think the oil prices will remain in the $20-40 range for fairly long period of time and probably will come down from there. This is again because of some awesome piece of data that has come up on July 2nd, the same day that we had the jobs data, and this is Tesla deliveries. Beating the most optimistic street estimates of 70,000 vehicles for this quarter, Tesla actually landed up delivering 90,000 plus vehicles, and that's at a tumultuous time when their main original factory in Fremont, California was closed for 7 weeks in the whole quarter. Incidentally, this is Tesla's second biggest or best delivery in its entire history so far, that made Tesla today the most valuable company, automobile company in the world, surpassing Toyota. How did they do this? Is it by following just the first principles of science or observing the Moore's law? Yes, but something much more than that as well, and that is meticulous planning and also taking a leaf out of Apple's playbook for China. This is the second time we see Tesla doing it, taking a leaf from Apple's book. Earlier it took out the decision to make autonomous driving chips by themselves, just exactly the same way Apple did it in 2007 when it decided to make its own chips for its smartphones. So then what's Apple's playbook for China? It is basically locking up the Chinese manufacturers, the component manufacturers and suppliers, creating creating value migration such that Apple becomes a very important player in the eyes of the Chinese government. In 2007, the Apple's cost of sales were just about 16 billion, which grew to approximately 161 billion by the time we reached 2019. And as we all know, Apple has all its production out of China. So that's the amount of gain that Apple has been able to lock in for China. Tesla is doing the same thing, déjà vu. The Tesla Gigafactory, the approval for which came in 18, came up in a breakneck speed to start production in 19. A very heavily automated, robotized factory. So while Fremont was down due to COVID, Tesla's Shanghai Gigafactory was on overdrive. In the process, Tesla has already generated about 13 billion of revenue for the Chinese component manufacturers who are suppliers to Tesla. But what Tesla is doing different from that of Apple is the fact that America and China today are the world's two biggest automobile markets. And Tesla is feeding its Chinese demand from its Shanghai Gigafactory. On the other hand, China, reeling under pressure to contain pollution, is on an overdrive to move away from gas powered automobiles to electric vehicles. And Tesla is thus in a right place at the right time. No wonder then that Tesla is the most popular electric vehicle manufacturer in China today. For Tesla, the journey doesn't stop here. They are expanding their Shanghai Gigafactory with new production facilities to manufacture their most popular and the latest Model Y, which is yet to come up. At the same time, they are setting up yet another Gigafactory in Berlin on the similar lines to that of Shanghai, which will support and supply the whole European markets. This is again in line with our analogy that post the trade wars and COVID, we will see an increased or heightened protectionism, where most of the manufacturing will move near shore or onshore from far away offshore, and thus affecting trade as well as countries that were predominantly dependent on their export economies for prosperity. So at this rate, the gas powered automobile industry world over, whose businesses were already on fire, would be disintermediated much faster than we had expected. And with that will be gone the oil demand. And that's where we believe that the oil prices will remain benign in the $20–40 range and will go down over time, making a huge benefit to the oil consuming economies, and therefore we will not see an inflation or an hyperinflation anytime soon, despite the extraordinary monetary easing and quantitative easing that has been put in place. Tesla is just a case study, a point of reference. If we look at one 20-year period, say from 1999, when there was just 36 million internet users, and today when we have 4 billion internet users, and flip it around to check the growth, the phenomenal growth of adoption curve and sales growth in the business of FANG stocks. That means Facebook, Apple, Amazon, Netflix and Google. 80% of their phenomenal sales actually came riding on internet and mobile. This phenomena will further accelerate and accelerate rapidly as that supercomputer in our pocket called smartphone gets smarter and smarter due to better, faster, cheaper chips with a humongous computing power and riding on technologies like 5G. In short, technology as a sector has hardly missed a beat in this COVID crisis. Rather, on the contrary, it has gained significant momentum, and quite naturally so, because in a crisis, innovation always accelerates, and technology being the bedrock of innovation, disruptive innovation, it's no wonder that technology has really marched ahead. This phenomena is further getting reflected in the Wall Street. The tech-heavy Nasdaq index has not just broken off from being lockstep with the old economy Dow Jones, but had really marched ahead to conquer newer and newer highs, lifetime highs, while Dow Jones has still been struggling to get back to the pre-COVID levels. That said, we would rather expect the old economy to actually catch up to at least some extent with the march that the tech stocks are going through, and that will be rather soothing for our entire economy, because it will give more time and space out the rapid transition that is being ushered by tech-led disruptive innovation. Disruptive innovations such as autonomous driving may be still a few years away, but it is certainly and surely inevitable. If you really look at the amount of disruption it will cause, the amount of jobs that will be lost for millions of people who around the world today drive us around, those are big changes. But history has repeatedly showed us that technology always results into productivity gains and widespread economic prosperity. So the need of the hour is to brace the change and see it's coming rather than resisting it in disbelief or in disregard, and move on to adopt the new skills as our economy and economic activities transition. If we fail to brace this, then we are setting ourselves up for obsolescence and irrelevance, impairing our wealth and capital permanently, but also probably setting us up for losing our livelihood.